Hello, Buckeye fans. We are here once again at the Woody Hayes Athletic Center. If you couldn't tell, we work for 24/7 Sports. Dave's fixing our camera there.
Yeah, I don't know if I really fixed it.
It's all right.
It's a little leaning Tower of Pisa. But yeah, we do. We work for 24/7
Yeah, I don't know
Sports.
if you knew that, but that's also Bucknuts 24/7 Sports.
Yeah.
All right, so we are through all of our media availability this week. The Buckeyes will practice according to Ryan Day for the final time in pads tonight. This is Wednesday night. Before we get into what we just heard from Ryan Day, what we saw at practice yesterday, how do you feel? How do you feel about this game?
I don't know.
That's a good answer.
I really don't know. I feel like we're going to know early. Not for sure if Ohio State's going to win or lose the game, but I feel like seriously within the first 5 minutes of real time, not even 5 minutes of like football time, I think we're going to know if Ohio State comes out ticked off and aggressive. I think that it's going to be a good night for the Buckeyes. If they come out a little timid, kind of on their heels, like what we saw against Michigan, it could be a long night for the Buckeyes. So I keep going back and forth on it. We're going to make our official predictions on Friday. I'm going to pick Ohio State to win. I don't know. I haven't settled on an exact score yet, but I think it's going to be a close game. I'm going to pick Ohio State in a close one, but Tennessee is a legit good team, and they're better on offense than I expected coming into this game, at least statistically. Eighth in total offense, eighth in scoring offense, obviously on offense in the nation. And I knew they had a great defense, fourth in the nation in both scoring and total defense. But they've also played kind of a weak schedule. They did play Alabama and Georgia, but really the other 10 games on their schedule, not against good teams. So it's going to be interesting. I think Ohio State's going to win a close game, but I keep going back and forth on it.
Yeah, I was talking with our Bill Kurlick this morning about something that led into this conversation. And I think that a lot of fans, and in talking to friends, seeing people on our message board, like the Michigan game has really clouded people's opinion of this. And rightfully so, right? That's the most recent game. It was a terrible effort by Ohio State. It was probably the biggest upset in the history of that long rivalry. But like there are also 11 other games of good Ohio State, right? Yeah, the Oregon game, the defense wasn't great, but it was a 1-point loss against the number one team in the country. So like I think I feel more confident than a lot of people, and not necessarily. I agree with you that I could see it going either way. I probably will pick a close game, but assuming they can get this offensive line like figured out enough, I think they'll be all right. I think you have enough talent on this team, as long as you're not in your own head about we have to win the game this way, which is what I think they were against Michigan, and I don't think they will be against Tennessee. I think they're still the number two team in the country for the vast majority of the year, right? And the talent hasn't changed other than the two guys on the offensive line.
And even though they'd have to win 4 games to win the national title, Georgia would have to only win 3. It's Ohio State that's tied with Georgia for the third best odds to win the national championship if you look into stuff like that. And obviously Vegas is trying to get money on both sides, but it also goes to show Ohio State's not entering this as some like dark horse team. They're tied with Georgia for the third best odds to win this whole thing. If you're wondering, Oregon has the best odds, no shock there. Texas second best odds, and then Buckeyes and Georgia at number 3. Then you got Penn State 5, Notre Dame 6, and there's a big jump to Tennessee at 7. It's 25-1 odds for Tennessee, which is pretty big when you consider Ohio State's odds 5-1. So, yeah, it's interesting. And just going back to what we were just talking about, it's just hard to get a good feel for this Tennessee team because they're definitely talented. They've got a really good defensive line. They got one of the best running backs in the country. Their up-tempo offense is very interesting. But, again, they have not really played a tough schedule this year. So, and this Buckeye team, if they come out motivated, we know how talented they are. Even though they're favored, they almost can go into this game almost with the underdog mindset because they keep hearing from national pundits. Yes. Not everybody. I've seen some national guys pick them that Ohio State's ripe for an upset. Ohio State's going to be the team that gets upset. Tennessee's going to come in there and take over the stadium. Every time I hear that just is throwing another log on the fire to me for Ohio State's, I hope, for Ohio State's intensity. Every time they hear stuff like that, I think they're going to use that to their advantage, especially coming off an extremely embarrassing performance.
Yeah, I was going to bring that up. Actually, I was ready to ask Ryan Day about, I know you guys don't listen to the noise, but guys hear things. How do you feel as the higher seed in this, the team that was number 2 all season, the fact that so many people have already kind of given this to Tennessee, and you're at home, all that. I got the second question, which I did not expect, and so I asked about the offensive line.
That would have been great if Steve got the third one.
It would have been because you got the first.
Yeah.
Let's go into the offensive line. We didn't do this yesterday after practice. I'm sure people by now have heard. We saw very little of practice, and it wasn't even what we would normally see when we get 15 minutes. Normally, we get stretching, and then punt, and then they actually do some things. There was no punt. They actually kicked us out at the start of the punt period. We saw like very brief individual drills. I mean, Dave and I were talking with Steve afterwards, trying to put together a practice report, and it was like, so.
It was a challenge, my
Yes,
friends. But we got one up. I even called it a quick observations.
Yeah.
It was practice report, quick observations. I don't know if it was much of a report.
Right. And the headline, so to speak, was Luke Montgomery at left guard, Tegra Shabola at right guard, Carson Hinsman still at center. But it was very brief, right? Like, they could have done a completely different thing. Now, I asked Ryan Day about that. He didn't want to name a starter at left guard. He said both Austin Sareveld will rotate at both positions. It wouldn't surprise me if Luke Montgomery starts and Tegra Shabola starts, but Carson Hinsman staying at center. I know there was some talk about Josh Padilla. What do you make of this? And is that the biggest question for you? Is if this works, Ohio State probably wins. If it doesn't, it could be a long night.
Yeah, I mean, I do think Chip Kelly and Ryan Day need to do a better job, and I'm sure they are, of you don't want to do what you did against Michigan, obviously, and just bang your head into the wall. You've got to scheme around it. Even if you believe the offensive line can play better in this game, you've got to do a better job of scheming around your weakness going against their strength. But yeah, if you tell me Luke Montgomery starts this game and plays well, I think that Ohio State's going to have a very good chance of winning this game. It's so interesting, though, like why all of a sudden, Ryan was asked about this, what else is he going to say? Like, why now for Luke Montgomery? Like, what, has something happened? And Ryan said, yeah, he's continued to get better and better and better and better. And it's interesting. As Pat said, he stopped short of saying Luke's going to start, but reading between the lines, I'll be shocked if Luke doesn't start. As he told you, I love your question, and he answered it with, well, yeah, we're pretty much set, because you were saying, like, are you guys still trying to figure things out? He's like, we're pretty much set. He just didn't want to reveal, I think, who the left guard is. When we were out there yesterday again, seeing like two periods, it was Luke Montgomery that was with the ones. I say that because he has Donovan Jackson to his left, Hinsman, Tegra, and then Josh Fryer. It was Luke Montgomery out there with the ones at left guard, so I expect he'll start. And then Dave was clear that Austin Siereveld or Siereveld, I always pronounce it wrong.
I say Siereveld.
Siereveld.
I could be wrong on that.
Siereveld. Austin Siereveld will rotate in at both spots. I don't know what to make of that because cohesion's so important on an offensive line. But
do you like rotating at a game like this?
I don't, but they probably are like, okay, we don't. They don't know who their two best guards are. Tegra has struggled,
which is problematic at this point.
Yeah, very problematic.
And injuries have played a part, obviously.
Definitely, and but even after the two injuries, it's taken now. I mean, this Luke Montgomery will now be the 9th offensive lineman to start a game.
6 different combinations.
Yeah, it's crazy because Mahalski started a game. Now, I assume Montgomery will start a game. Obviously, Hinsman hadn't started a game until his secret suspension, as we're calling it, was lifted. And Siereveld has started a couple games this year. So it's pretty wild, man. But, I don't know. I think they seem quietly confident about the offensive line just being able to, they got to get off and they got to, control the line of scrimmage.
Knock them back.
Yes. And he seemed
we
pretty
may
confident.
Swing and miss a few times, but we've got to knock them back.
I like that. It's kind of like the whole, listen, I don't know if I'm going to hit the right person, but I'm going to hit somebody type of thing, don't just go out there and hit air. I mean, we'll see, man. I mean, it's Ohio State's weakness against Tennessee's strength, but hopefully the Buckeyes learn their lesson in that Michigan game.
Well, and the good thing is, while Tennessee's defensive line is across the board good and deep, the strength is on the edges with their pass rushers. And I think, I like enough of what we've seen of Donovan Jackson. I think Josh Fryer has had a solid year this season. Now, these are really athletic guys. Penn State is probably the closest because they didn't see, was it Birch for Oregon in that game?
Yeah.
So you didn't get that test, though Oregon has other good defensive ends as well. But I do think that as much as Michigan, there is comparisons to Michigan, and they are good in the interior, it is not the defining factor of that defensive line, so to speak. Speaking of defense, yesterday was supposed to be defensive media day. We did sprinkle in an Emeka Egbuka interview with that because he was not available on Monday. I think they at least presented a very confident front going into this game.
We should.
Yeah, I agree.
Number one defense in the country.
Yeah, and they didn't lose the Michigan game.
No.
And I think Caleb Downs made a really good point when he talked about, look, we didn't play a good game earlier this year. Because there were some questions about, rumors about team meetings and things getting heated. And, he kind of was like, we were that side of the ball at one point in time. And Jim Knowles said it. He told those guys, just like the offense did for you, go pick a guy up after you have a game like
One
that.
of your offensive brothers. Yeah, I like that.
Yeah. So,
and there sounds like there definitely was a heated. For those who are thinking that that's a rumor, they basically confirmed. I mean, Will Howard confirmed it. Somebody said, "Was it a heated conversation?" He said, "No." Yeah. Yes. He like in one breath went, "No." Yeah. Yes. And then Caleb basically confirmed that there was a. They talked it out, man. They didn't hug it out, but they talked it and yelled it out. But now it seems like everybody's on the same page. They know they have to play complimentary football to win this game. So, hey, it's good to get it out, man. It's better to get it out than to keep it pent up. So, sounds like they had a very interesting offense versus defense discussion that included the coaching staff.
Yeah, and I think, look, you lose any game. I think after the Oregon game, after every game they meet, right? There's meetings, you discuss things, whether it's the whole team, whether it's positions, whatever it is. You discuss the good, you discuss the bad. When you lose, the bad gets brought up even more, right? And I think when you lose to Michigan for a fourth straight year, and that is one of your stated goals, and then it eliminates another goal because you don't go to the Big Ten championship game.
Especially that Michigan team.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, it's a bad Michigan team.
I think heated conversations are good, and I think the way that at least what I saw that was getting thrown around on social media and things was very negative. Like, guys were turning on each other, and that's not the impression I assumed and then got from these guys. As you're saying, it was necessary conversation.
Definitely, and you can see why the defense would be ticked off, just like the offense was ticked off, I'm sure, at the defense after the Oregon game. But it is good that the coaches spelled that out for them, and the leaders of this team, don't forget, that you guys were on the other end of that stick against Oregon. So, yeah, I think it was a necessary conversation for them to have. I would have loved to be a fly on the wall to hear exactly what happened. I'm sure it was extremely interesting, but yeah, it definitely happened, and I think it was a necessary occurrence.
I think it will be interesting to see how Tennessee best wants to attack this Ohio State defense. Obviously, this was a conversation yesterday. You hear about a team that spreads it out and all this, and you think they're going to throw it all over the place. Well, Tennessee runs the ball primarily, and they have a really good running back in Sampson who can do that. Good offensive line. The quarterback can run a little bit. But if I'm Tennessee, I want to attack and see what Denzel Burke, especially Davison Igbinosun and the pass interferences, test those guys a little bit, because I've defended the cornerbacks throughout the year, but even against Michigan, there was the one, I forget who got open, but there could have been a big pass from Davis Warren that just he missed on because he's Davis Warren down the sideline. There were some blown plays there. How do you expect Tennessee to come out and attack? Do you think it's just business as usual like they've done all year, which has been a nice blend? I don't want to make it sound like they're a run-first team exclusively. They do run more, but what do you think this plan of attack might be?
Yeah, I think they will try to attack Ohio State's corners. They'll definitely mix it up. They do a great job with tempo, and they do actually are a more balanced offense than I expected when I delved into the stats. Definitely a better running team than passing team. That's no secret. But I do think they're going to test Ohio State's corners. I thought that'd be a huge strength for Ohio State coming into the year with Burke and Igbinosun. Whatever you think of Jordan, I think Jordan Hancock's had a really good year. With Matthews coming off the bench, but it's just the starters have not played up to par. And Igbinosun, it's because he's too handsy. Burke, because he's gotten burnt too much. So they're at least going to test that. Now, that's not Nico's strength, but he's got a big arm though. Knowles was talking about that. He's got a cannon. This is why he was the number one recruit in the country.
That you just left it Nico and you didn't test.
I'm not even going to try. I know some people in the press conference were all trying to, outdo each other with the, over pronunciation. But I stick with Nico. Okay, I don't want to mispronounce it. Let's just be real. But, he can make the throws, but it's also not his forte. But there's no doubt he's got a strong enough arm. So they're going to test Ohio State's corners deep. But their strength is running the ball, using that up-tempo. And if Ohio State can force a couple of 3-and-outs, that would be huge because then, that just completely throws a monkey wrench into everything they want to do.
3-and-outs and turnovers, I think, too.
Yeah.
Because you mentioned the tempo was the other thing I wanted to address with the defense. Jim Knowles, I thought was interesting, and you wrote a little bit about this. I'm going to go into more detail. But he talked about how when he was at Duke, Coach Cutcliffe wanted that defense to be the fastest lining up defense in the country because of the offenses they face and the offense they face in practice. So he said this defense is built for tempo. Now, they haven't always seen it. Some Oregon, Indiana did it a little bit. Most teams have actually slowed it down against Ohio State to keep the offense off the field.
Yeah.
But for me, that's going to be maybe the biggest thing for Ohio State. Can you get lined up quickly and know your assignments? You recognize your keys, kind of identify all that stuff that you have to do before the snap, but do it in a much quicker, because, watching some of their games, they snap the ball 5-6 seconds sometimes as soon as they get lined up. So there's not a lot of time to think.
Yeah, and Knowles says we're built for this at Ohio State.
The way they get the calls in quickly.
Yeah, he said we are the fastest play calling defense in the country. They pride themselves on being the fastest play calling defense in the country. And as Pat said, that started when he worked for David Cutcliffe at Duke. Interestingly, where did Cutcliffe make his name before he got to Duke? Tennessee. So it's interesting to hear Knowles bring up Cutcliffe, who was a really good coordinator under Phil Fulmer, including when they won the national championship in 1998. So yeah, I like what Knowles said there. If somebody asked him, is it more difficult playing against an up tempo? He said, no, it's not more difficult. It's different. Quiet confidence as usual from Knowles, and rightfully so. So I like some of the drills that he was talking about. What they're having, let's say the offense is lined up, and normally I'd be like ready to face the offense. What they're having to do, they're having the defense turn their back to the offense in practice. And at the very last second, turn around when the offense is snapping the ball.
Snap an ID quickly.
Yeah, so you have to immediately. You don't even get those 5 or 6 seconds. You immediately have to try to decipher what's going on. So they're doing all kinds of things to get Ohio State's players ready for this, and it's interesting. Knowles said going back to Duke, fastest play calling defense in the country. They prided themselves on that. Oklahoma State, same deal, same year here at Ohio State. And like Patrick was saying, they haven't had to do it much this year, but they know they're going to have to do it on Saturday night. So we'll see. He seems confident that this is not going to be difficult for Ohio State, but I don't know. I mean, Tennessee plays at a breakneck speed, and they do it well. Some teams do the tempo, and they're not really great at it.
Yeah.
Tennessee does it faster than I've seen, and they're very good at it.
Yeah, and Coach Knowles has also seen some of this spread stuff when he was in the Big 12. Caleb Downs played against Tennessee. I believe he had 9 tackles last year when he was at Alabama. So, there is some experience with this. It'll be just how quickly they can adjust. The last thing, Coach Day was asked about the scoring on the opening drive, which I hadn't realized until the question was asked, hasn't happened since the Oregon game.
Jeez.
Yes, which, given some of the teams they've played, you do have Penn State and Indiana in there, but Michigan, obviously the Nebraska game was bad all around. He talked about the fast start, and that's always obviously a goal. But I think in this game, even more crucial. And Coach Day's talked about, he thought about taking the ball first if they won the coin toss at Northwestern, decided not to do it. I wonder if maybe this is a game where you win the coin toss. Hey, let's go out, let's score. Kirk Herbstreit talked about the crowd. I think that's going to be a bit overblown. I think you're going to back your Buckeyes. But if you go out and score, as opposed to letting Tennessee go down and score, or even put together a good drive, I think that could really get the crowd into it more than they will already. I think the fast start's going to be huge.
Yeah, I that would be against his character to, if he wins the toss, to receive the kick. But I like it because if you're able to score, then all of a sudden you have all the momentum. And, you don't risk, kicking the ball to the other team and them going down and having, a drive and they get all the momentum. Now, it can work against you. It's a risk, then you don't get the ball to start the second half. You can't play into the first 4, that middle 8, as they call it, the last 4 of the first half and the first 4 of the second half. And coaches love that. But if you can get the ball and go down and score, especially a touchdown, and then for Ohio State, that, as you're articulating, that would be especially big in this game, coming off what happened against Michigan. Wondering exactly. As soon as Ohio State, if Ohio State is confident, not thinking, if they're aggressive, if they're ticked off, they're going to play well. And I think that would be an aggressive move, and I hope he does it. Now watch Tennessee, win the toss, and they'll defer, so it won't even matter. But that would be huge for Ohio State. And if if Tennessee has the ball first, get a stop, get the ball back, and then you go down and score. But I think scoring first here, although it wouldn't assure you of a victory by any means, I think will be very big on Saturday night.
And I think with that middle 8, which I do think is important, and something that I don't think a lot of people think about, you can also get stops there too, right? You can flip the middle 8 in your advantage, even if you don't get the ball coming out of halftime. If you can score right before halftime, get a stop and score again, it's the same type of thing. You just don't necessarily get the ball first. I said last thing, one more thing. What is your thought on the cold and in terms of this game?
It's not supposed to be windy, right? Last time
I don't think so.
Yeah, that was the one thing. I think in the 20s, and it's supposed to be dry. It's going to be low 20s by kickoff, but it's going to be in the 20s. It's not going to be in the teens unless the forecast changes. If it's dry and it's not windy, I don't think the weather's going to have a big effect. The reason, and I think Ohio State played this up too much. It was windy for the Michigan game. It wasn't crazy windy. I mean, you were there. It was 11 mile per hour wind.
It wasn't bad.
Okay, but if it's single digit winds, which it's expected to be, I believe, then I don't think the weather is going to be a big factor, because you talk to quarterbacks, it's always the wind is the biggest factor. The wetness is the biggest factor. The cold, now, if it's 40 below zero, different story. If we're talking about the Freezer Bowl, the 1981, AFC Championship game between Pat's Bengals and the then San Diego Chargers, where the Bengals won at Riverfront Stadium. Little Ken Anderson versus Dan Fouts battle there. Anyway, seriously though, if it's in the 20s and it's dry and it's not windy, I don't think it's going to be a big factor. What about you?
Yeah, I think it is a factor. Like, you see it in the NFL. It can certainly play a part. I think it would be more of a factor if this was Georgia or Florida as opposed to Tennessee, which has dealt with some cold. They are in the mountains in Knoxville.
Yeah.
But I like you said, if it's not windy and it's not rainy, I think these guys can catch the ball. You can throw the ball. You think about that Browns-Steelers game a few weeks back. Like, both teams threw the ball around a little bit in that game.
Yeah.
And, you can do that. That was a lot of snow and stuff. You can still throw the ball. I think it's a bit overblown that Ohio State struggled in the cold. You don't have to just run the ball. I think Ohio State needs to be able to run the ball at least some in this game. But yeah, I agree. I think it is a factor. I don't think it is the factor in this game.
Yeah, I would agree with that.
All right, we're going to wrap it up. We'll have plenty more as we lead into this game. I will have one of our Tennessee writers on the Bucknuts Happy Hour tomorrow, Dave and J Book on Friday, giving their predictions. We'll have our written roundtable later this week, all the normal stuff you expect during game week, and then late Saturday night.
Yeah,
what we learned live.
What we learned live will be going into Sunday morning.
Yeah.
Sunday morning. Hopefully it's easy like Sunday morning, not like ticked off like Sunday morning. So yeah, we'll be keep it locked to Bucknuts, guys. We're gonna have full coverage rest of the week, and pregame, during the game, post game. Keep it locked to Bucknuts.
Yep. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.